So when did you move to LA? How long have you been out there?
It actually, I will never forget it ever. It was on Valentine's Day. It was literally 3 weeks before the pandemic hit.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah. So I had obviously no idea what I was coming down into, and especially being from Northern California. And Chico, like, it's definitely a small town. It's like a college town. It's not necessarily like the town is that big, you know what I mean?
Right.
And so when I moved down here, I was here for literally exactly a month, basically. And the pandemic happened. I was like calling my mom. I was like, it's like the apocalypse down here. I was like, do I need to come back up to Northern California? And she's like, yeah, you should come back. And I was like, I don't know what to do. But I obviously stayed. Yeah. And I'm really glad I did. Once the like initial shock of like just getting used to how hectic and crazy it was, I was like, okay, we're going to be okay. It's just going to be a little scary as everyone felt everywhere.
Oh, of course. Well, I mean, that's just crazy that, you know, making the move to LA for music, I mean, that's a big deal at any point in any era. But then I'm sure your idea of what it was going to be like changed pretty quickly there.
It changed so quickly. Like, I remember obviously coming down to LA, there's so much here as far as just like people industry go, shows, like so much I expected. I was like, oh, I'm going to be like at shows and hanging out with people and like doing all this stuff. And then I was like, just kidding. No, I'm not.
All I'm going to be doing is paying a lot more in rent.
Yeah, exactly. Literally exactly. And so, but the one thing I will say was a huge positive is I've worked like my entire life. So that was the first time I had ever had real time to work on music. And so for me, that part of it was a huge positive because I just had time that I had never had before in my life.
Sure.
So that part was like a really cool to find a really good positive in a really bad situation.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're able to make use of that time, I think that's great. And when you say you've been working your entire life, just like jobs since you were young, basically?
Yeah, just like day jobs kind of thing. So I actually, until recently, I got fired, fun fact, from my job. But it was a good reason. It's because I was gone playing too many shows. So I was like, if you're gone playing too many shows, then that's why you're getting fired.
That's a
we'll take that as a good reason. Yeah. But I actually worked in coffee for like the last 6 years or something like that. I was a barista.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of just my day job. I really liked it, especially with music, because I tried to always work the morning shift. So I would work really early in the morning, and then the rest of my day I could do whatever I needed to for like music, videos, whatever I was focusing on at that point.
Yeah. Are you more of a morning person?
Now I'm not really anymore. I feel like my body is like, oh, we finally get to sleep. Like, what the heck is this? And so now I say I wake up around like 9 to 10 range, but I can still, honestly, something I am pretty proud of is I'm kind of a person, like once I wake up, I'm up. Like, I'm not really a slow waker upper. It's just if my alarm goes off, I'm like, okay, time to.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way that way. Like, I'm not much of a snooze button person.
Yeah, I feel like the only time, and I'm sure you know this is like after a show when your alarm goes off at whatever time, you're like, oh, that stinks.
Well, yeah, I mean, it hurts, but that's almost for me, that's almost like a different kind of feeling. It's that kind of feeling is just like, I'm not even human anymore.
Yeah. I remember it was actually after the DC show, like I had like 45 minutes before my plane boarded, and I always bring a blanket with me on planes, and I just lay down, no shame, lay down on the floor, like put my blanket over my head, and I just set an alarm, and I was like,
that's the move. I've slept on the airport floor more than once. Yeah.
Yeah. I have no shame in airport floor games.
Yeah. None. You got to do what you got to do, man.
Yeah, exactly. You got to get that sleep when you can.
That's interesting. You were working in coffee. Do you know Blank? The producer,
yes,
Blank.
I love him.
I just talked to him on this show like a month ago, and he was saying that he almost did coffee instead of music. Like almost
really?
Like he got so into making coffee that he was going to open up his own shop. And
I didn't know that. I remember us talking one time about how he also worked in coffee, and we were like, oh, I feel like a lot of people I know who do work in the music industry at some point were like a barista, but I never knew that he wanted to open his own shop or anything. That's really cool.
No, I had no idea.
He's such a great shop owner. He's so nice.
Like, he's such a nice guy. You could totally see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
He kind of looks like a barista too. He just has that look.
Has the vibe. And it'd be so cute with like a bunch of plants everywhere.
Oh, for sure.
It'd be so precious. That can be his side thing eventually one day. He can have some coffee.
Yeah, when the music life slows down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. If it ever does, he's crushing it.
Oh, no, absolutely. Yeah, more so like when he wants to retire, I guess.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting for you then to like flip that idea, because it kind of seems like for you, if you're getting fired from the job for being too busy with music, maybe you're on the opposite trajectory right now where things are really starting to pick up. I mean, obviously the pandemic, I'm sure, delayed some of what you were hoping to happen, but how does it feel right now? I mean, because it does seem like you're playing a bunch of shows, releasing music with a bunch of cool people, putting out great music in general. Like, does this feel like an exciting time? Does it feel like a stressful time? Does it feel like you're not quite there yet? What does it feel like?
All great questions. Honestly, it feels like the coolest thing in the entire world, because this is what I have wanted for as long as I can remember. Like, even before I knew how to make music, people would be like, oh, what do you want to do with your life? And I would just 100% confidently be like, I'm going to be a DJ producer. And they'd be like, oh, cool. Like, do you make music? And I'd be like, I have no idea how to make music yet. And I just, from the get-go, kind of knew that's what I was like, I don't know how to use Ableton yet, but I'm going to figure it out. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, I DJ'd first. And I started playing guitar in the 5th grade. So like, I've always had a music inclination, but I just never opened a door. I grew up in a very small town. I didn't even know electronic music existed until I went to college and everything. And so when I found electronic music, I was like, oh my gosh, this is something I can fully create. And that was something I loved. And so to go from that to now, where people like being on an RL Grime tour, where I was watching RL Grime, just being like, you're one of my biggest inspirations of my entire life. It's like the most surreal, incredible feeling in the entire world. Like, I just feel so thankful. I feel so lucky. It obviously does come with stress that I feel like it's such an incredible job to have, but with every job comes stress. And so it's like, you can be living your absolute passion dream, and it's just a stress that you might have not dealt with before. So most of it for me, just like, I'm like with touring, like learning how to take care of yourself. Like, that can be really stressful on your body as far as sleep and like getting the right nutrition. And if you're drinking or if you're partying or like whatever you do and however you take on tour, it can really exhaust you. So I feel like learning how to take care of yourself and not put that stress on you, like mentally and your body and all of that kind of stuff. I definitely underestimated that with touring. I was definitely underestimated that, but I learned really quickly, like, okay, this is what I need. This is how I'm going to operate best.
Well, that's good. I mean, what was it? What did you have to adjust to kind of make it more comfortable for you?
Yeah. So I would definitely say I hate flying. I'm getting better with it, obviously, because I don't really have a choice, but that flights have been like the number one thing. Cause at first, obviously, as up and coming artist, you don't necessarily have the funds to have like the best flight times because they cost more money, or like the best seats because it costs more money and everything. And so I was definitely erring on the side of, oh, I need to save money and da 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 da. And now I'm like, pay the extra $50 for that window seat, pay the extra $50 for that flight that's 2 hours later, because I was trying so hard to save money, but at the cost of like my mental health. And I would just got to the point where I was so exhausted, so tired, and just running myself thin when I didn't really need to be. And sure, it is harder on the financial side, but I'm like, you know what? I'd rather spend the extra money and feel like a functioning human and not feel like I'm going to have a meltdown moment and things like that. Or even with hotels too, like paying the extra $50 for a hotel that might be a little bit better than the other one. And that's especially as a female, like just to feel safe and secure and like, and I mean, obviously everyone to feel safe and secure, but if I'm by myself or something like that, just to like have all those things that ease you a little more, relax you a little more. For me personally, that just helps.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. All of that I think makes perfect sense. And it's it's all individual too. Like what you were saying, whether it's, you know, a nicer hotel or the window seat or whatever it is, I think everybody's got to find their own kind of mix of ingredients as far as, you know, the things that really end up mattering. Like for me, I'll take a 6 a.m. flight any day. That for whatever reason, it just doesn't bother me. It's not fun, but it just doesn't bother me that much. But yeah, stuff like the seats or like a nice hotel or even like where the hotel is. Like I hate spending all my time in a car.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. Or even like maybe you have an airline preference. Like maybe there's an airline you like more.
Everybody's got an airline preference, yeah.
Oh, I have my airline preferences for sure.
So my thing with the airlines, like, and I have them too, but I still think it's ridiculous because the reality, this is my opinion, the reality is that like they're all basically the same, but just like everybody has one or two experiences that sour them on something or that make them love a different airline. And then in our brains, it's just like, oh, this is the good one and that's the bad one. And the reality is it's like, nah, they've tricked us all. They're all the same.
It's seriously so true. Like that's 100% where my things have come from. Or like maybe one airline has like one thing, like tiny thing that I prefer. And I'm like, oh, they're my favorite right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like the better snack or whatever it is. Yeah.
Except I think we all, no offense, Spirit, sorry, but I think all of us aren't on the Spirit train.
Well, yeah, no, the budget airlines, Spirit, Frontier, what's the other one? Sun Country. Those can fuck off.
Yeah, I know Spirit. Yeah, I'm like, and that's just asking for like, your flight's getting delayed. You're not making your set.
That is a lot more. They're actually less reliable, which is an issue.
Yeah, with what we do, we definitely like. Obviously, airlines to a point are always necessarily not reliable, but we definitely need the most reliable options.
Which is your favorite right now?
Right now, Delta is my favorite.
Yeah, I'm a Delta boy too.
Delta is my favorite. Yeah. I also, this sounds really bad, but they're the only airline that has alcohol. And sometimes if I'm like feeling really, really anxious on a flight, just a little beer helps ease the pain a little bit.
Interesting. I didn't realize, is that since the pandemic, everybody else took away booze?
Pandemic. Yeah, it's kind of like the kindergartner thing where there were people who were obvious. I mean, airline flight attendants, they have to deal with so much already. Yeah. So you add alcohol to it and people obviously, I'm sure, were making their lives absolute chaos.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I don't know if some flights on other airlines, if they're longer, they might have it. But to my experience so far, Delta's the only one.
Interesting. I didn't realize they had made those changes. But yeah, that makes total sense. And it
makes sense.
And there you go. That's like another little thing that helps.
It's just, I always say it's kind of just like my comfort blanket. Like if I need it, it's there.
Right. And that's almost got to be more of a mental thing, right?
It's 100% a mental thing. I like psych myself out about it so hard, and we're working on that one. I'm like, I'm going to get over this little lump, but I'm getting a lot better. So I'm proud of myself.
That's good. No, that's good. Yeah. Do you know, have you examined that? Like, do you know where the thing about planes comes from?
Yes, I 100% know where it came from. So it's actually kind of funny because I started flying by myself when I was 7 because my parents were separated. And so I was like that movie Unaccompanied Minors. That's exactly what I was doing.
Wow, so at 7, man.
7 years old. And it's like they basically like assign a flight attendant to you and you wear this like pin, which now I'm like, that's kind of, it's like a target for a child, but you have to like sit in the very front row and they like check on you and make sure you're fine. And they give you Oreos and movies and stuff. So when I was younger, I loved flying because I was like, I get Oreos and I get to watch these movies and stuff. But then I remember as I got older, I had this one flight that was just a really bad flight, like turbulence. I didn't feel very good. There's just like so many things that kind of combined to not make it a great flight. And I remember I landed and I called my mom and I was like, Mom, I just had the worst flight. Like I've never really experienced anything like that. And then she was like, yeah, I've never told you this, but I really hate flying. And for some reason, like and she was just trying to like, obviously it's not her fault. She was just trying to relate and like make me feel better. But for some reason, that like combination of events just did it for me.
Done, yeah.
It just did it for me. And so, but I have gotten, and then at that point, I wasn't flying a ton either. So since my memory was associated with like, oh, this was the last time I flew, it was really bad. Maybe this time's going to be like that. And I just kind of was creating an anxiety that wasn't ever there before. So now we're like taking it back.
Yeah.
We're taking the steps the other way again.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I mean, I feel like if you can identify exactly where it comes from too, that probably helps to sort of process the feelings. And you said you grew up in a really small town. Where was that? I've moved actually, like, I don't know the exact number, but I've moved around 20 times in my life total. I know, I've moved a lot. And so the town before Chico, it was this town called, there was Wheatland and then there was Grass Valley. And both of them are like these super cute little towns. Grass Valley is more kind of, if you're on your way to Tahoe, it's like a little town on your way to Tahoe. There's like Grass Valley, Nevada City, Auburn are like kind of all along the way to Tahoe. And Grass Valley is where I was spent probably like the second most time in my life as far as growing up. And it was a really cool town. It's like a really small little hippie town. Everyone was super nice, bunch of cool places and everything, but definitely there was no electronic music happening at all. And my mom and my dad are both extremely country. So like from them, I was hearing like everything from like Johnny Cash to Garth Brooks to George Strait to Shania Twain. And so my world just didn't even know that was a thing until I got older and had more access to like media and all of these things and other people. And then I discovered around that time was like the Skrillex, Daft Punk, like that whole really big come up era and everything. So how did that come into your life? Like how old were you? Where were you living? Where did you hear it?
I was, I think I always laugh about this though, that every time we touched song, that was like the most mainstream, like quote unquote EDM song. That was probably my first experience ever with an electronic song. Oh yeah, it's such a great song. So that was probably my first one, but when I actually like dove into it was when I had just left high school and went to college, and I was in the dorms, and the floor above me was the baseball team. And there was this guy up there who was like super into electronic music. And I just was like, this is so sick. And then we just bonded. And next thing I know, I'll now this is bad, but the first person he ever showed me was Bass Nectar, because he had like just gone to a Bass Nectar show. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then we just started going to like festivals together, because at this time it still was like, no one was necessarily doing it at the scale that people are doing it now. So we kind of just became like these two people, and all our friends were like, you're going to Coachella? You're going to Hard Summer? And we were like, yes, we are. We were just so stoked on it. And the first festival I ever went to actually was Coachella. I'm very spoiled that was my first festival experience. I'm very lucky for that. But that was when Skrillex was doing his like Mothership tour, and he had his spaceship up there and everything. And that was the exact moment where I was like, this is what I want to do. I feel like a lot of people had a Skrillex aha moment. I was definitely one of those people as well.
No, he inspired a generation of producers, man. It's crazy. It's so many people I've talked to on this show. It's just wild.
Yeah. And just for like I obviously don't make dubstep, but to have someone like him, like he's just so innovative in so many different ways that you can take so much from him. Even if you don't make dubstep or bass music or whatever, you can still just learn so much from what he did, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, when he came out too, the kind of dubstep he was making, it was so different from what was out there that I think now we can kind of look back and see that, yeah, maybe he was like starting or ahead of this wave of like really aggressive dubstep that we see now. But back then there wasn't a precedent for it. Like it felt just as fresh at that time as like the stuff he's making now that is impossible to categorize, Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's just something I've always really admired about him, and what I admired about him back then was just the level of innovation. Like there's always something he is doing that we haven't heard or we haven't done yet. And it sets a tone for other people, even like right now with his vocal chops. Like I feel like that's such a prominent thing that he's doing right now. And you can hear how that's carried to so many different people and genres.
It's so crazy, man.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's so funny you brought that up. I was thinking about that the other day, because there's so many songs now that are just copying that Skrillex vocal chop from a year or two ago. And
yeah,
maybe this is just like producer brain, but for me, I'm just like, it's so obvious. Like, can't everybody tell what's happening here?
that's honestly really true. And I always think that too, like with producer brain, I'm like, okay, so all of us probably do see that as a pattern, but to like your electronic music consumer or fan or whatever, they probably just like, this is a banger of a song.
Yeah,
you know?
Which honestly is probably the better way to be.
Yeah.
Like sometimes
your brain's not picking it apart.
Yeah, like, I don't know, because that's how we all started, was just like, I like this song. This is a banger. This song makes me feel something. Or I like this melody. You know, it was never more complicated than that. Sometimes I wish, I talk a lot about this on this podcast even, of trying to like just have something in your life that you can just be a fan of or an enthusiast that you don't have to pick apart, just to try to like reconnect with that sort of pure reason, like why we all started doing it. I mean, how is it for you as far as, you know, music in general these days? Like, it's weird to go that experience from going from a fan to a participant to now like a touring artist where it's a business almost.
Yeah.
Has your relationship to music changed? Do you still enjoy it in the same way? Do you have other things you enjoy in a similar way?
Absolutely. So it's so funny you brought the like fan to music to touring artist thing now, because one of my also biggest idols was Foster Thomas, like growing up.
Oh, sure.
Or in the same, that was like, especially obviously trap. I love them. And so now, like having Kurt bring me out on stage at EDC, I was just like, this is the craziest moment of my entire life. Like I was a hoodie girl through and through. Like I was such a fan. And so it is so crazy just to have like that full circle moment and everything.
He's
and
the best.
So
he's the best.
Sweetest person. I adore him.
Yeah.
Such a great person.
He and I, we came up in Chicago together back in the day. I've known him forever.
And something I really admire about him too is like, he just loves good music no matter what. So for him, like for his EDC set, it's a perfect example. Like when I was there, he brought out me, LeMay, Noctu, and then Frost Pop was right there too. And those are all like, we're all up and coming artists. And he just cares about good music and good people. So he just put us on. It wasn't like, oh, you're the biggest artist here, so I want to bring you on stage just for that moment, which like, that's also cool. If that's what you want to do, no problem. But just like for us, like that just means so much to us. And to have someone like that who we've all admired for so many years, just care about like our music and us and not about like status or anything. He just was like, I'm playing your song, come up on stage. And I was like, this is the coolest song of my entire life. You know what I mean? And so I just like really admire that about him, because he's very much just about putting people on. You know?
No, 100%. I think both Josh and Kurt have been pretty consistent with that throughout their career, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go on and on, but like even before the Flostradamus that we know now, like pre Hoodie Boys and Hoodie Girls and all that, you know, Flostradamus, when they were in Chicago, it was like, you know, mashups and edits, and they threw these incredible parties in Chicago that were very much like a local thing. They'd sell out every time, but they were very much like a local Chicago thing. And even back then, like I remember playing shows with them, and we'd bring out like local juke artists and, you know, stuff that like just doesn't necessarily have to do with like the immediate scene or exactly what's going on. And it was always, I mean, they've both always just been like omnivores musically.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's so sick. And that's like, even going back to just the love for the music, like that's what it's all about. Just like having that love for music, or like just finding new things, finding new artists. As far as my love for music, I still love it so much. I definitely think, I don't know if you agree with this, like the more you get into the electronic scene, the less you listen to it far as like a day-to-day basis. Yeah. I always feel bad saying that, but especially when you spend so much time making it and you're making sets and you're DJing, like that part becomes your life. And then for me personally, I listen to like pretty much everything. I like Red Hot Chili Peppers. I also like Jimi Hendrix. Also controversial, like Kanye West.
I don't think that's like controversial.
I always feel bad. Like I know who he.
I mean, he's a controversial person, but I don't think it's controversial to say he's made a lot of incredible music.
Oh, exactly. And it's always I'm always like, as a person in the music. Yeah. And so
pretty undeniable.
Pretty undeniable what he's also done for the music scene as a whole. And so my taste is pretty much everywhere. But as far as electronic music, I'm sorry, everyone. Besides obviously like the people who are close to me or the people that I really support, or if I find a new artist, like that is always on my radar. But as far as just like going through SoundCloud like I used
to. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just my relationship with it changed so much over time that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I love hearing new songs and I get so excited about new dance music, but it's excited in a different way than hearing like a song from a band that I've never heard before. Because when I hear a new like club tune, immediately my brain is like, oh, I can use this in this way, or I'm connecting all these things. Whereas with, say my favorite band puts out a new song, that's just like, oh shit, a new song from my favorite band. It kind of takes me back to that like childhood place.
Yeah.
As opposed to new dance music, which still lights me up, but it's in a very different way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it, honestly, because it's like, I also really like metal. I'm a big metal girl.
Same.
Oh, and so like with metal music, I'm never picking that apart in my brain ever. Yeah. Like I'm just like, this is so sick. But with electronic music, obviously you're like, this is this, this is this, this is this. And your brain is just kind of dissecting it the whole time. Whereas it's hard to take it in as like one full composed piece.
Yeah,
and you can still admire it and love it. I am the biggest fan of so many artists and I still admire and I still love it. You just hear it differently. Like we're just like, that's just what our minds are programmed to do.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And there's also, it's hard to like take yourself out of it too. Cause there's so many incredible artists that I love in our scene, but when I hear them put out something, it's hard to remove myself from that equation because it's, there's always either like, oh, I wish I made that song, or like, oh, I don't even know how they made that song. And there's all these extra layers. Whereas, again, my favorite band puts out a song, there's no connection. It's just,
absolutely.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for blessing me today.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I feel that. Like you hear a lead and you're like, how did you make that lead? Right. What did you do to do that?
Well, how did your own production evolve? Because you said you started off DJing before you started producing. Were you DJing in college?
Mm-hmm. My first show ever was a backyard frat party.
Nice.
Yep.
Still to this day, college parties, some of the most fun parties I've ever played.
So fun. They just want to go crazy. The energy is always so sick. So I was lucky in the aspect of Chico, like, because since it is like a college party town, there was very much like parties and stuff like that. So I got booked I guess you could say, for a fraternity party. And I played that. And then there was this guy at the time in Chico who's kind of like, he was like the frat DJ. Like he was the guy who was DJing all of them. And he was like, not in a frat at all, just like was the guy doing it. And he was such a nice guy. And he like would DJ at some of the bars that were downtown and everything. So then once he like heard about me DJing, he was so cool about it. And he was like, you should come DJ with me at this stuff and like at these bars and stuff. And I was like, okay. And so then I started doing that. And then the way that it kind of evolved where it was now was Chico is also still a pretty big stop for like artists when they're on tour, because there's a couple venues there that are like pretty incredible venues. They also renovated the El Rey. Now it's been a nice amount of years, but it was like completely new sounds, like sounded so great in there. And so the local promoters of that like venue and everything, my actual coworker at the time, she sent them an email with like all my music and all the stuff I had been working on. I didn't even know she did it. And next thing I knew, I got a Facebook message from them and was like, hey, we've received an email with like what you're doing right now. We'd love to get on a call with you about like opening some of our shows. And I was like, oh my God, so cool. And I was like, this is the coolest thing in my life. And so then we got on a call, had a great conversation. And at the time, I don't remember everyone, but it was like Cruella, Audien, Gareth Emery, Borgore. Oh, there's a fifth one. I can't remember who it was. But they're like, these are the 5 shows we have coming to Chico. We want you to open 3 of them. Pick the 3 that you want. So I picked Cruella, Gareth Emery, and Audien. And I remember the first one I did was Cruella, and I was like, obviously Doors, like second. Oh, actually, really great part of the story, honestly, is I remember we were just about to hang up the phone, and he was like, can you play on CDJs? And I had never touched CDJs in my life, like ever. And I had this voice in my head that was like, don't say you'll learn, just say you know how to do it. And I was like, yes, I do. And he was like, perfect. And we hung up the phone, and I was like, I need to touch some CDJs.
You made the right move there, yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously figured that out. And then I played the opening spot for Cruella. And at the time, I don't know if you've ever heard of Dutch Bros. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, but I don't remember why. What is that?
It's kind of like a Starbucks, but not really. It's a coffee chain.
Okay.
And it's like, now they have a couple ones you can walk into, but it's mostly just a drive-through. But it's really known to be kind of like people are in your face, like, how are you doing?
Sure,
and like the music's really loud and everything.
Yeah.
So that's where I worked in Chico at the time. And it's like a really cool, like everyone who was a part of it very much supported each other. So at Doors, I had literally like 100 people waiting outside to come watch me, but it was literally just all my coworkers because they're the nicest people in the world.
Nice.
I have so much love for all of them, and Dutch Bros in my heart for that moment, because obviously for local promoters, they're like, oh, this girl has 100 people outside.
Yeah.
Let's freaking bring her back. Let's bring her right back, when it was just all my incredible coworkers who just showed up for my first.
That's so nice.
It was, I adore them all. Like, so thankful from the bottom of my heart for that. Yeah.
How did that first gig go?
Oh, it was so fun. I was just laughing and smiling the whole time. One of my coworkers blew up a poster in my face, and I was just like laughing the whole time because it was just all my coworkers was like,
that's so good. Face. That's like the perfect first real gig story.
Oh, it was so good. I'll remember that forever. My mom came. It was good.
That's nice that the promoter was, that open to like letting you pick shows and calling you and all that. That's also, I feel like, a very rare. Most local openers do not get that kind of experience. That's really nice.
No, not at all. And after that, like they gave me some also really cool opportunities, like just with growing and everything. I remember one time I played there, they had me play direct support for Jaws. So like, especially at that moment in time, like it was the craziest show I had ever played. And it was in my hometown in Chico. So it was like, I felt like the coolest person. I was like, oh my God.
That's beautiful. And you said your friend sent them your music. Was this just like DJ mixes on SoundCloud? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it was. I had some DJ mixes. That fall, I was about to put my like first bootleg remix I made on SoundCloud. And I had this mix series called Vibin. You will not find them anywhere. They're so bad. I erased the trace of those. But yeah, she is so sweet. I'm still grateful to her to this day. But she took them, and emailed them. And like, even beyond that, when people would come through, if it was like, obviously, if it was an elderly person, they aren't going to be like, hey, do you like electronic music? If it was someone who looks like they could maybe be involved or like into that kind of music, they would be like, oh, hey, are you into electronic music? And if this person would be like, oh yeah, they would like write my SoundCloud link on the lid of their drink and be like, check this girl out, like check her out.
That's crazy, man. What a cool thing.
Oh, it's like, I am so thankful for it. Dutch Bros, people like make fun of Dutch Bros a lot because I was never the person when people came up and was like, how are you doing? Like I was just be like, hey, what's up? How are you?
Right.
But it's like really crazy how much, if you are a part of it, how much like the coolest people work there and they will like ride or die support for you. And I was so lucky to have that. And I really contribute a lot of my like early growth to getting me to where I am now to that, because it's so rare to have that many people, especially when you're like, hey, I want to be a DJ, like show up to come to your show or like actually do things to support you. So I was really lucky to have that many amazing people.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. I mean, there's nothing more valuable than having that community support at the start. Absolutely nothing. And it makes me think about what you were saying earlier, that, when you first got to college and you met your first friend who was also into electronic music, and you guys would start going to events and there weren't that many people doing it. And even before then, if you're moving around a lot as a kid, I have to imagine it's hard to find any kind of stable community for whatever your interests are.
100%.
I mean, was college kind of that first time where you actually really found, like, whether it's music or not, but just like a community in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, and it sounds kind of corny, and I always say this, but like, I think a reason so early on in my life, music became such like the determinant factor in my life is because when you are moving and you don't have a lot of consistency, especially at a young age, like you always can make new friends, but obviously when I'm in the second grade and I'm leaving and moving somewhere else, like I'm not going to keep in touch with that second grade person, you know? So music kind of became like music and my mom were like the stability in my life. And so just at a young age, I just was so deeply in love with music, and whatever I was listening to at that time, whatever I was like attached to at that time. And that's how I'll never forget when I went to my mom, I was like, I want to learn, I told her guitar and the drums. I was like, I want to learn how to play guitar and the drums. And she was like, really? And I was like, yes. And then she was like, okay, if you save up enough money for the first month to like show me that you really want to do it, then from there on, I'll obviously like do it and everything. And so I saved up enough money and I took the first month of lessons, like all on my own and everything. And then from that moment on was kind of the music, as far as like the being more involved with like actually making it or playing an instrument or whatever that is. And then as far as like growing a friendship community, it was definitely in college just because I had moved so much that like, again, I just didn't necessarily have like that core group of friends, especially at my age. Not that I'm super old or anything, but social media wasn't what it is now. So we didn't have like that easy accessible of communication and keeping in touch and everything. And I did have a couple really good friends from high school that I'm still friends with now. But as far as just like feeling like I have like my community and my like people who ride or die with me and all that stuff, it definitely was when I started to go to college and branch out and find all those things.
Yeah. Sure. Well, it's really nice that, you know, you were able to sort of, once you got there, to find what sounds like a pretty awesome community. Just there waiting for you.
It was.
What was the source of the moving all the time when you were a kid?
There honestly really isn't a reason. Me and my mom, I think I guess I was young, but my mom just kind of liked to move, and we had family in different places and stuff. And so I was born in Kansas. That's where it's so funny because people think I lived there. I didn't live there. I was just born there. Right. And we lived in Oklahoma because that's where my dad is. My dad still lives in Oklahoma. And so we lived there, and then obviously they split up. So then we like came to California, and that's how I've been in California most of my life. And my mom has a job. She's like a pharmaceutical rep. So it's a lot of traveling for everything. So like, depending on like her territory or whatever that was and stuff like that. So
did you like it as a kid moving around?
I honestly feel like I'm pretty fortunate in the sense that, I mean, there definitely were some towns that I was more attached to than others where I was super bummed to be leaving. But I honestly feel like I handled it as well as any kid could. And I also feel like something I am really, really, really thankful for it. I feel like at a very young age, I was really good at communicating and like getting along or understanding diverse groups of people. And I'm really thankful for that as an adult, just because I feel like I was a lot more open-minded and like learned a lot at a really young age than maybe some people had. So
yeah, just like getting exposed really cool to different types of people, different situations, different places, all that.
Yeah, exactly. So like that was really cool and everything. And I feel like now I've just learned so much and met so many different kinds of people. And it's cool too, because now when I like go places, if I still have friends in that city, they'll be like, let's like grab dinner or let's grab lunch or something. And so that's really cool too, because it's kind of like I got friends everywhere a little bit, especially now with social media, what it is like I have a friend that I literally haven't seen since second grade, but we follow each other on Instagram. And it's like, that's pretty cool, especially for me. Cause like, I'm just like, you're my one friend from second grade.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important to keep those connections if you're able to. And it's almost like you went on tour earlier than anybody else, you know?
Yeah. Honestly, maybe that might have been my like also started my love for the touring game. Is like you're used to this, you know the game,
right? Yeah. You can make this work.
It's like you can do this. You can tour. It's cool though because I've like seen a lot of cool places. Like I lived in Boulder, Colorado for a little bit too when I was younger, and that was gorgeous. That was so pretty.
Yeah, Boulder's great.
Yeah, I was in the 8th grade for that. So I was still pretty young, but it was really cool.
Yeah, I feel like that's a nice place when you're about that age, because, you know, those are the formative years where everything seems so important and like, so, you know, just significant. Like everything is important when you're that age.
Yeah. That was one of the moves that I was a little attached to. That one I was a little bummed about. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm a big, like, everything happens for a reason. So it definitely served its purpose, and going back to California was great too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. It's got to be a really interesting way to grow up. And I think it probably, I don't know, do you agree? Like, I feel like that kind of childhood, moving around a lot and being on your own a little bit. I mean, if you're flying by yourself and all that, it's got to, I would imagine, make you able to figure out what you want to do, what you like, what you don't like. And maybe, do you think you got focused in a little faster than some people because of that?
Maybe. I definitely agree with the fact that I definitely think it served a big independence for me. Like, I'm really good at being on my own, and I'm really good at like figuring things out when I need to. And my mom, literally for my whole life, was a single mother too. So she was a really strong, independent, hardworking woman. And that is what I'm seeing as like a young girl with her. And so all of those things I very much help attributed to, like, honestly, even my work ethic. One thing I'm really proud of, I do work really hard, and that's like one thing I can say with confidence. And I definitely think that was probably from that, just because, especially even with school, like when you're changing schools a lot and having to like adjust to different curriculums and like figure things out and stuff, like you just kind of have to figure it out. And so I feel like that just instilled in me like an independence. If I want to work hard, I will. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And what were you going to school for in college before the music thing took off? I originally wanted to go to school to actually do like PR for a label. Like I wanted to still work in music somehow, but I just never anticipated at that point, because I didn't know that I could make it, that this would be, because even when I was playing guitar and everything, I never anticipated myself being in a band, which I think this definitely correlates to what we were exactly just talking to. Sometimes I'm a little too independent, and I was just like, I feel like me in a band, I don't really know how that's going to go. Too many people to rely on.
Yeah. And so when I discovered this, and I just was like, wow, all of my creativity can go like directly from me to this DAW, and it's like how I hear, how I feel. I'm definitely a very sensitive person, and I'm a very emotional person, not afraid to admit that. And so like being able to take all this creativeness I never really had an outlet for, it's like I finally found that outlet. And I was just like, wow, I will never forget calling my mom being like, okay, so I've decided I don't want to work behind the scenes of music anymore. I want to be the person doing it. And she was like, okay.
Yeah, that's got to be a weird moment for any parent, because that's like, oh boy, this is going to be something.
She's the most supportive person, but definitely at first, especially like just with anything, they're like, well, I don't want people to take advantage of you or whatever, which, or like even like financial stability in this kind of job, like all things parents worry about are obviously the first thing.
Yeah, well, and those are all valid concerns. I mean,
absolutely. My mom's like, especially at that, it's the classic quote. She was like, "It's a phase." I was like, "It's not a phase." And even now she laughs. She's like, "Definitely was not a phase."
That's so funny. Like, well, how did you start producing? What? How did you get into it? I mean, I'm sure once you started DJing, eventually it was like, well, if I want to keep doing this, I should probably figure it out. But how did it actually happen for you?
Yeah. So I always wanted to make music. Even when I started DJing, it was like something I wanted to do. And something I do think was really nice about DJing first was like really understanding waveforms. Like it kind of was really nice to be like, okay, this bar, blah, 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 blah. Like that really helped, I feel like, transition into understanding producing a little more as far as structure goes. Like just kind of having a general layout, because I obviously didn't know what I was doing. And so I knew I needed some sort of DAW because I was just obsessed with researching so much. And so Ableton, I actually asked for it for Christmas.
Nice.
And I was like, I want this for Christmas. And so I got it for Christmas. And then I will never forget it. I downloaded it on my laptop and I opened it and I was sitting on my bed. And I remember I immediately shut my laptop because I was like, that is the most intimidating thing I've ever seen in my life. How do you was like, you're kidding me? People do not make music on this. Like, I was like, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, if there's no prep, if you haven't, taken a class or watched a tutorial, it's incomprehensible the first time you look at it.
So incomprehensible. I was like, what? Okay. And so then I was like so intimidated by it, but I was like, no, I can do this. Like, I can figure this out. And so YouTube was a best friend. And then also, still one of my best friends ever, his name's Nico, a very talented producer. He was the only other person that was going to Chico State that I knew of at the time that was making music. And I had a class with this girl named Chantal, and she was the sweetest person. And she was like, oh, one of my boyfriend's friends like makes music and stuff too. You guys should meet. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, I would love to do that. And so we started hanging out all the time, and he's so great at making music. And so I just literally became like his prodigy.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And and it was so fun. Like, we just work on music all the time to like whatever time in the morning, just like having the best time. And that was basically where it all started. And we still are great friends. Like, when we have the time, we'll work on music together if we can. We still love to do that.
Yeah.
And that's 100%. I owe a lot to him for my producing knowledge, because he had so much knowledge and was just down to like work on music together. Because like I said too, there was my other friend, his name was Mullen, who was like the big DJ guy, but he wasn't making music at the time. So I was like, you're the only person I know making music right now. And so we just did it together.
No, I mean, that's great. I think that having fun with your friends, if you find people who like to do the same thing and you're kind of at the same level, it's the best.
Oh, it's so fun. And just like, I just like am so for working with people, because you just learn so much. Like, I can know something that you don't know. You can know something I don't know. And you just learn so much. And I mean, at that time, I knew absolutely freaking nothing. Right. I was like,
so every day is a discovery. Yeah.
He was like, this snare sounds bad. I was like, huh?
Well, I mean, I feel like at this point, you have really developed your sound into something pretty unique. Like, how is that just a process over time? Were there any kind of like light bulb moments along the way?
It was pretty much a process over time. I always gravitated toward trap. I've always been a trap girl. There was like a little second where I thought I wanted to do like a live set type thing, and that got kicked away pretty quickly. But there's like a couple songs that came out of that. That's like on my Spotify, where I was like, oh yeah, I was really having that moment, wasn't I?
Going through a phase. That was a phase, yeah.
Those songs were a phase. But yeah, I always knew that I wanted things to be either like super sick trap banger or like a very pretty melodic trap side. And I always really gravitated toward ARPs as well. ARPs, I feel like, are a pretty big characteristic in a lot of my music as well. And so it was just developing it over time. And I feel like a lot of things, something I do, I'm going to give away one of my secrets right now, so you guys can use it if you want. I love Omnisphere. Omnisphere is one of my favorite plugins of all time.
It's a great plugin.
It's the best. And something I really love, and I feel like has kind of become a really big staple for me, is whenever I have like a melody or a chord progression or whatever, I love taking like a choir, like a vocal choir, and putting that in my drops or in the intros or whatever. It like fills it out really nicely and gives it so much emotion. And I just feel like that's such a cool thing. And that's definitely, when I say my sound has developed, I feel like that's become such a core characteristic along with ARPs, because it just makes it sound so sick and also so emotional. And I'm an emotional person. So I feel like it's just kind of like all tied everything together.
Well, I think, I don't know if this is exactly what you're talking about, but I think when you take elements like that, whether it's a choir or like the, recording of like a cheering crowd or whatever it is, you put little stuff like that in the backgrounds of your songs. It really does. It fills them out in terms of like the sonic spectrum, but it also, I think, fills out like the feeling of a song, you know what I mean? And it's like, you might, as a listener, maybe you don't even hear it like up front in the mix, but just having those little touches in the background, it's such a valuable, once I figured that out, man, it's one of those things that I think everybody does it to some extent with different sounds or I don't know, but I'm fascinated by those little things that aren't the main idea, but that without them, the song just doesn't work,
Yeah. And without them too, like you were saying, mine might be a choir, the next person's might be like a horn or something, whatever it is to them. Like, even if you take those things out, like that component alone, you might not hear it, but once it's gone, it's maybe going to feel way less like a Rossy track than it did before. Because that, like, I might have like a crazy banger over here and a really pretty melodic song over here, but there's going to be like something that makes you feel like you're listening to a Rossy song. And if you take that out, it's just not just a song, but it's not maybe a song you'd associate with me.
Right. Yeah. You know? I think that's a really good tip for anybody out there trying to figure out, you know, how to stand out a little bit. Because it's not always that, you know, you have to make something no one's ever heard before, but it's just you have to make something that sounds like you, that actually sounds like you.
Absolutely. I had a professor, and it was in a freedom of speech class, and I'll never forget this. And he was like, no thought is your own thought. So basically the idea that like inspiration is always coming from something of some way. And even though it might be this really new innovative thing, that idea was definitely sparked from something or an idea of something else. And I just feel like, yeah, you don't have to have the craziest, most innovative song in the entire world, but just like if you take part of it and make it your own or whatever that is, that's it. And even when it comes to like when people are like, oh, you need your own sound. Oh, you need your own sound. I don't think it has to be like your lead sound. Like it doesn't have to be like this crazy thing, but maybe there's just something that people are like, oh, I know that.
Yeah, exactly. Know? Just a little signature, a little flourish, whatever it is. A
little signature something.
Yeah. I mean, and you mentioned that you use a lot of arpeggios, and that's something that, you know, you're known for. That's something I wanted to ask you actually, is I think you've kind of started managing to sort of transcend some of the scene that you started out in, or like probably some of the labels people were putting on your music at the start. And is that a conscious thing for you? Because I think, you know, at a certain point, it's like, oh, you know, this whole list of artists, these are future-based artists, or these are trap artists. And it can be, a lot of people get stuck in that. A lot of people never make it out of kind of that like middle area. And I feel like you're starting to get there if you're not there already. Was that a conscious thing? Was like evolving the sound, the way you work, the way you write music? How did that happen?
I love that. I definitely would say yes, it was a conscious thing, just because I have always wanted to be an artist where I wanted to push my abilities and also just inspire others at the same time. And I'm like, okay, well, if I get stuck in this like same thing I'm doing all the time, like I'm not pushing myself as an artist. I'm not taking chances out in the world, which at the end of the day, like to me, art to a point is definitely about taking chances too and putting yourself out there. So I was like, okay, I could fall into like the typical whatever trap game of like, this is an 808 and this is this and this is this crazy lead and blah, 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 blah. But I was just like, I love these genres that I'm my own person, where I can take what I think, what I feel, my creativity, and put it on these things, and hopefully you perceive it in a really cool way, which I feel like is kind of happening, which is really cool, which I really like. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's when I think, you know, you're on the right track, is you're making decisions to do more personal work, or work that you feel like is a closer reflection of yourself. And then, you know, you're getting even better results, right? Like that to me is the sign you're on the right track. Yeah.
Because even with that video I just put out as the teaser for my song coming out tomorrow, like everyone always tells me, they're like, oh, like, you're so happy, which is an incredible compliment. I appreciate that so much. I love happy things. But this song and like how I came up with the name and like what my concept became for the video is like way darker than anything I've ever put out. And my concept of the video actually came from anxiety. And ironically, I was so anxious about my video about anxiety. and so I was like, oh, the irony here is too loud. And like my team is so incredible. And they're like, Rossy, no, it's such a great video. It's such a great video. And I was like, okay. And it got perceived incredibly well and everything, but definitely everyone was like, ooh, Rossy's in her villain era. Like, what's going on? And that just kind of went back to me being like, okay, well, if I'm doing the same, like just little la-la dance around the city somewhere, I'm not pushing myself. I'm not trying to change something. I'm not pushing my creativity or maybe your perception of creativity or whatever that is. And so I was like, no, I'm going to do this. And it's going to be different. It's going to be cool. And hopefully you guys like it. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think that's good. I think both as a person and as an artist or a brand or whatever you want to call it, in that, you know, we're all multifaceted people. We're all happy sometimes and sad sometimes, you know, and I think the art you make has got to reflect that. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you're like, just talking to you now, you seem very happy and you seem very nice, but then listening to your music, there's plenty of darkness and aggression.
Oh, yeah. And like all of my songs, like, usually come from, especially when I first started out, we're coming from a place of like going through something. Like, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I'm going to make this really happy song. Like you were saying, a lot of my songs have some dark undertones or dark melodies or dark sounds or whatever that is. And there's definitely, I feel like people always say the best music comes from like pain or heartbreak and stuff, which sometimes is true. And so I definitely pull from things like that when I'm making my music. And I feel like it's such a good outlet for me to be able to get that side out or whatever I'm feeling out. Right. You know what I mean? And that's why, again, it was so fun to make this video, just because I was like, this is cool. I haven't done anything like this.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting too, right? I mean, the new track, it's Hysteria. Is that the right? Yeah. Okay. So that's the new one. I haven't heard it. I haven't seen the video, but what's different about this? What else was exciting other than the video?
What I originally went in making the song with was, I never opened my sets with my own song because I always like to come out swinging, and none of my songs were giving me that. Like, this is an opening set song. So I was like, okay, I want to make an opening set song. And that is how, like, I sat down wanting to make this track. And then it just kind of evolved to so much more than that, with kind of like, it's like a very eerie, distorted chord progression sound that like comes in the start. And then it has these like crazy classic trap horns, trap brass stabs that are out through the drop and everything. But something that like was kind of interesting about the drop, and my manager actually pointed this out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about this, is instead of like the brass stabs changing key to where your ear like wants to hear sonically, it doesn't. And there's almost something like a little maddening about that, especially as producers, like you're waiting for that change, but it just doesn't come. And instead, like, there's stabs, and then the horn is like the key change of it, and then it goes back into the same thing. And so I was like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. Like, what should I name this? And then I just came up with this concept of, like, every person, we have anxiety to a degree. I obviously have anxiety, especially talking about flying. And the concept of my video came from being like, when you're in your head and you just like kind of spiral into like a panic attack or an anxiety attack, and you're just like, like, get this voice out of my head, like, stop. And then the video obviously will be out by now, so it's fine. And then I like wake up in the desert basically, and I'm just by myself with a bed. And so it's basically like, when you're really anxious, you can feel so isolated and alone, and if you're spiraling and you can feel scared. So it's just me in this desert, like, being a crazy lady by myself. And then at the end of it, I light the mattress on fire. And that's kind of just like the resemblance of like resilience, strength, and like just really doing the best you can. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how like the name and everything came to be, because the name's Hysteria. And so obviously when you're a little hysteric, so everything like very much linked together. So the song that I started out as originally just being like a classic trap banger evolved to meaning so much to me, because I've actually never really written a song kind of coming from a place of just being a person who has anxiety. And now that's what this song is kind of like a strength or resilience to anxiety. That's really nice. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, is writing music a way for you to help work through that? Like, how do you deal with the anxiety?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, music definitely helps a lot. I also am really bad about exercising, but that's definitely a thing that I'm trying to work on too. I'm also a really big journaler. I'm big in journaling, big in manifesting, and those really, really help a lot too. And it's gotten a lot better. My anxiety used to be like, probably like 5 years ago was a lot worse, but I've definitely learned how to like grow from it and handle it. And now a lot of it is just like pre-show nerve anxiety or flight anxiety, or like I have a song coming out anxiety.
More focused anxiety than general.
More focused anxiety and less so much like it controlling my life. But it definitely is hard. Like, anxiety can feel like a very debilitating thing. And so it's kind of just a song that's like, F you anxiety.
No, that's great. I mean, I deal with some anxiety as well. And it's because I don't know, I didn't always have it. I don't know if you were.
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah. I didn't either. Yeah.
And just dealing with that kind of feeling and trying to figure it out. I mean, for me, it was definitely exercise helped a lot. And that's it just kind of becomes one of those like daily practice things where whatever you need to do, as long as you just stay on top of it, then it's usually all right. But
yeah. Absolutely.
It is one of those, it's just weird to me that it just starts happening one day, you know?
Yeah. I feel like I always say, I mean, not always say, it's very situational, but even just as we get older and life becomes a little bit more lifey, like you just have natural anxieties that come with it as being an adult, and things that like you might have been fearless about when we were younger, you like now see what the repercussions of that thing could be, or like how dangerous whatever that thing could be, and you're like, ooh.
Yeah, I completely agree. Although I will say one constant that we've come back to a bunch of times in this conversation is you're talking about these different moments in your life and your career, and a bunch of times you're like, oh yeah, that was the happiest day, or like I was just so happy, I couldn't believe this was happening, that kind of thing. Which in some ways is really nice to hear, because it seems like you're still able to really be in the moment and appreciate what's happening rather than feeling the pressure of a career that's building and feeling like, oh, well, I just have to get to the next step or get to the next goal. Yeah. Do you think that's right? Are you able to be in the moment a little bit?
Absolutely. Something that I always, because I am like every other person where I get ahead of myself where I'm like, okay, I want to headline Coachella. I want to do this. I want to do this. And it's really easy, especially in what we do, to have like a future thinking mind. And at the same time, like, yeah, I still want to do all those things. And yeah, do I manifest them all the time? Absolutely. But I think one of the biggest things that we can not do that's helpful for ourselves is like right now, if you would have told me when people were writing my SoundCloud on Dutch Rose Cuts that I would be doing this, I would be like, no, there's no way. And so it's like, even though I might not be headlining Coachella, I'm still literally living my dream right now. And I need to take that in, because who knows what can happen. Like, you never know where your life could go. But I'm just like, if I'm letting the fact that I got to go on tour with RL Grind get past me, I'm doing this wrong. Right. Like, if I just like, and like, obviously I know that can be easier said than done, but it's just like, I'm living dreams right now that I'm so lucky to have, opportunities that so many people would love to have. And I want to make sure I'm thankful for that, because also I just feel like I'm not doing the right thing if I'm like not stoked on it.
Oh, 100%. And I think part of that is a certain confidence too, right? Like you were saying earlier, that you could confidently say that you're a very hard worker, and that, you know, if you put your mind to something, you can probably get somewhere with it. And that to me, that kind of like self-realization, music shit aside, is like, okay, well, whatever happens, like I'll be able to figure it out.
Yeah,
even if it's not easy at the time. And I think, being able to come to that kind of realization about yourself, so valuable as a creator. It's almost like having that support system of the people who came to your shows in the early days, where it's just like, well, you know, this is going to be here regardless of the rest of whatever's happening. Yeah. And so, you know, we'll work it out.
Yeah. And you just have to, like, even though it is hard, we all have times where like times where I've got in my head about it. We're human. It happens. But I'm just like, if we don't believe in ourselves at the end of our day, or if it's not coming from a place of like passion or love or whatever that is, like, you're going to drain yourself. Like, you just have to believe in yourself and be a little resilient, because that's like something with this industry, and it comes with the territory. Like, you're going to have so many obstacles and they're not going to stop. Whether you're an opening DJ or whether you're headlining Coachella, there's always an obstacle, many of them at whatever level you're at. And I think just having that mindset of being like, I'm a hard worker, I can do this. This is what I want. Yes, this is really annoying. And yes, today was a bad day, but you know what? Tomorrow is a new day, and I'm going to drink a White Claw and move on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think some people get it wrong when it's, you know, feeling like, oh, I have to say yes to every opportunity and I have to do the most right when I start, where it's like, no, like, to me, it's like, we got to fix ourselves first. And once we're solid, then that's going to be such a better base to go off and do all these things and then say yes to all the opportunities. But exactly like you just said, and I'm sure you've seen this, I've seen this a million times, that there's plenty of people in this industry who have issues of one kind or another. And the bigger you get, the more pressure there is. Like the little cracks in the armor, like they just keep getting bigger and bigger. And, it can get bad if you don't nip it in the bud at the start. And
I always say like something that I had to learn. And this was something that at first, like the little things I'd be like, oh, this happened, or oh, this happened, and it would like get to me. And then I was like, okay, I can't control any of these things. So I'm letting it affect me and my mood and like my mental health because I'm worrying about these things. So the only things I need to worry about are things I control. Can I fix this problem that's in front of me right now? No, I can't. Is it life or death? No, it's not. Okay, whatever, moving on. That's all. And like, I know that's very easier said than done. And it does take time and diligence and all of that stuff, but it's just so much healthier and better. Cause like you said, I feel like a lot of people too may think like, oh, when I'm this big or, oh, when I'm doing this, all my problems will be solved. We're going to have 99 more million problems when we're at that stage. So it's like, we got to learn to just take care of us and be like, okay, this happened. Okay. If I can control it, if I can fix it, great. If I can't, it's life.
Yep. No, 100%. I think, when you look to the most successful people in what we do, most of them operate that way.
Yeah.
Most of the biggest stars of our scene are generally, more or less nice people, laid back about whatever, and they're just kind of riding the waves.
Yeah, you have to. And like, obviously you're human. You're going to get pissed off sometimes. That's fine. But it's just like when you let it consume you, and if you become like a very inherently maybe like agitated or angry person, it's time to be like, okay, what can I do to take care of me? Because I'm supposed to love this. And right now I don't love it and I don't feel happy. So it's like, what can I do to rekindle that? And even just at the end of the day, we all deserve to feel happy. So just figuring out whatever you need or like to not feel that way, you know?
100%. I mean, I think one thing we keep coming back to in this conversation is that figuring out what you need for yourself, not what somebody else is doing, not what somebody else needs. I mean, I think, that's the key right there.
Exactly. And I can I'll give advice up and down if anyone wants to hear it. Like sometimes when people ask me for advice, I'm like, you want to hear advice from me? Okay. Just like, okay, I'm honored and surprised. But like, I can give you so much advice of what I think is good. And obviously it's all personal preference or bias. So I can tell you what works really well for me. And if it helps you too, absolutely incredible. But if it doesn't, just know it's okay. And you'll figure out your own remedy to what you need. But if this does help you, great. Like, glad I could be helpful, because that's also something that's so important in this industry. Like, there's enough cake for everyone. There's enough to go around. Like, we can all be there for each other, support each other, help each other. Like, my success isn't going to determine your success. Your success isn't going to determine my success. So there's no need to not be there for each other.
100. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, that's something I think a lot of people get wrong too, is because it is, I mean, it's a competitive scene. But, you got to take that competition as like a way to level up whatever you're doing and to evolve yourself rather than worrying about somebody taking something from you or you not getting it. Because, it's all out there for anybody who works.
Oh, yeah.
It,
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And so, I'm not saying, I should be clear, I'm not saying that everyone has an equal playing field. There's plenty of issues of racism and sexism and discrimination.
Oh.
It's
we could have a whole nother hour talk on that.
Yeah, wild. So I want to make sure I'm clear about that. But yeah, in a more general sense, I completely agree.
No, absolutely. Because it's like, we could definitely go down the sexism and all of that route right now. But it is in the sense that especially just with girls too, it's so important that we support each other and know that it's like, I'm here for you. Let's make a safe space for each other and support each other, because we all deserve it as much as anyone else out there does. So.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
And I mean, it's, I can confidently say I've been doing this long enough. Like, it is harder. Like, just from shit I've seen in my own career, it's like I've just literally seen women get treated different than men a million times over in a million different ways.
I can tell so many stories.
I'm sure you've seen
so many
a million times more than I have. Yeah, it's just
so
insane.
many stories. Yeah, and so it's just so important. And like you said, it is people do inherently feel competition, especially when it's something like you're all working for, striving for, whatever. But it's like, there's so many shows, there's so many lineups. Like, we all want to be a part of them. We all can be a part of them. We're all going to have our moment. Like, it's okay. Yeah. Everything's going to be okay.
Now that we're talking about this a little more, I think a better way to say what I'm trying to say is that it's not about like you versus me as individuals. It's about us versus the system, more or less. Like that, you know, the more people who can get together, like it's all, for me, it all comes back to community, because the system is terrible and whatever you think about when I'm saying the system, that you're right. Like, it's all bad, and it's not a great industry for the individual, but you know, banding together and supporting each other you're absolutely right. It's the only way we can move forward.
It's so important. And it's just like, in all people, like you said, like your race, your gender, your sex, whatever that is, like, it's just so important. Everyone's equal. Everyone deserves an opportunity. It's like, not one of us is better than the other. We're all just doing our thing in our own lane, and we just need to support each other in that, because everyone deserves it.
And like actual support. Like when you were talking earlier about, you know, your coworkers writing your SoundCloud link on the cup and all that, and you were saying like, who actually does that? That's so rare. And you're right, because I think it's so easy to, you know, like say like, oh, I support you on social media or something, but then actually doing something that actually supports people. I mean, that's great. Don't get me wrong, but it's so much more rare, because we're all kind of on our own little islands, and we're all busy, and everybody's trying, you know, it's tough for everybody. But yeah, I think the more we're able to really reach out, really help somebody if we're able to, you know, do something without being asked, all of that.
Yeah. And I think artists too, it's really easy to feel like alone and isolated and kind of overwhelmed in an industry, and just like letting them know that they have people there, or like you're there, or whatever that could be, in whatever form they need it, just because it's so easy to like get in your head and feel like maybe you don't have as many like friends in the industry, or like whatever that may be, or like you may feel like you don't have as many supporters. It's just like making people feel accepted, appreciated.
It's funny, like I'm like hearing myself saying these things, and it's like a lot of what we're saying, I think people can hear and be like, yeah, obviously, of course you should do that. But then it's actually very rare. And, you know, it's one of those things that I think we have to keep talking about, just to remind everybody that's like, no, this is a thing you have to consciously do. This can't just be something we sort of passively say.
Yeah. And I think like a big thing for artists right now, just obviously as a consumer on social media too, is like a lot of artists right now are feeling like they've had to transform into being content creators, which is true. Like the need to like put up content and all of this stuff and everything to like feel like you have to stay relevant or stay having a presence, or like whatever that may be. It's very much like being an artist has very much grown and changed from what it was, as far as just like social media and everything. And so it's like, I always see people talking about how like, okay, I can post this photo of whatever, maybe I'm eating a slice of pizza and this photo does incredible, and then I post a photo about like my song coming out and it gets like a quarter of the engagement. And so I know a lot of people just struggle with that, because obviously there comes a sense of like validation and wanting to feel support and wanting to feel like your art's being seen or heard, or because you put so much work and love and everything into it. So I think that's the big thing. Like even down to support of being like, just like liking that on Instagram for an artist can really like just make them feel awesome.
Sure.
And so it can be literally like that small. And I just know that's like a lot of people in the community are struggling with things like that.
Oh yeah.
You know,
it's insane. Yeah. I more or less, I'm over social media at this point.
I think a lot of people, especially, that's another thing too, with the pandemic, like we already had a big reliance on social media. And then when we had like no shows, no nothing, everyone's reliance on it became even bigger, and it definitely shifted things. So I feel like,
yeah, I mean, I'd say I'd even, instead of reliance, I'd say addiction.
Oh, I even catch, I wouldn't even say I'm out of addiction. Like I'll catch myself like on TikTok, and then I'm like, I'm literally like, I just sat on TikTok for an hour. Like, what? I'm just like, how is that an hour of my life?
Right.
Like,
oh yeah, no, I mean, we're all addicted. Nobody's immune to it. But yeah, this could be a whole nother hour too. But yeah, for me at this point, I kind of just decided that like I'm more or less done. You know, I'll do what I want to do. I'll do it when it's fun or when I have something to say or something to show. But other than that, like I'm done working for these giant corporations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that also goes back to what we were talking about earlier, just like doing what you need to do to take care of you. It's different for every person. And like, if that is something you've seen and felt and you know you need, it's like,
yeah, that's it, man.
This is my boundary with this. And everyone's boundaries are so incredible and so important. And you're like, this is my boundary and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah,
and
that's for any artist, especially people starting off. I mean, I feel like we're dropping a few tips here, but setting boundaries, super important as quickly as you can. If you know there's things you want to do and know there's things you don't want to do, stick to it, you know?
Exactly. And especially if you have a team around you, like obviously depending on where you're at, like have those boundaries. Once you get a team, make sure the team knows that boundaries and like everyone's on your side. Like they'll be like, okay, this is your boundary with this.
Yep.
We got it.
Yeah, 100%.
We got it. And so, and like you said, having those early and like, obviously like it does, like sometimes you learn new things or whatever, as you go in life, you learn new boundaries, whatever that may be. But just like, as you learn, just make sure you stick to them, because I was really bad with boundaries when I first started, like feeling like even asking people for shows I was supposed to get paid for, like even asking people for money or things, like I was so bad with my boundaries of being like, this is what I deserve. Even if it was $50, like this is what I deserve. But I gave you this much of my time.
That's the thing. People will take advantage if you don't.
And they will, in 2 seconds. And so, and like, obviously you always want to believe that people are inherently good and inherently kind, but that's not always the case. And if you aren't setting those boundaries for yourself, especially in certain industries, they're just going to take.
Yep.
So you just have to be like,
yep. You got to separate the business too. Like you can't, that cannot have emotion tied to it.
Yeah. And like, if you are open to a compromise, that's amazing, but always start with your like hard line of this is it. And then if you want to compromise, you can, but make sure you have your like line of
I think it helps.
I think
it helps you get stuff done too, because in general, at least for me, I appreciate when someone is very upfront of this is what I want, this is what I propose, yes or no. Like to me, I respect that way more than someone kind of, you know, talking like not saying what they mean, or somebody kind of like dancing around. So I'd much rather anybody who wants to do anything with me just say what it is, and then I can say yes or no, and then we can be friends regardless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know like I can speak from a female perspective, and a lot of my like girl artist friends and stuff, like something they get really scared about is like people thinking they're mean or like not nice because they're demanding certain things. I'm like, you're not demanding things. I was like, there's also a difference between having boundaries and being kind and just being like rude. Like you can easily go to someone and be like, hey, I'm so excited, especially if you're like brand new opener, don't like have anyone, you're the only person in your corner at this moment. You could be like, hey, like, I appreciate you so much. So excited to be a part of this show. Like, I was hoping for maybe this, like, let me know if that's a possibility. Like, you can be kind and also set boundaries, or also like whatever you're trying to get done. Like, you can get both of those things accomplished and not have to be like yelling or whatever. And so I feel like that's also something that comes with time and learning. And so you can learn how to balance it to where people feel respected, but you're also making sure you're not like, taken advantage of, you know?
I can only imagine too, how much more you've gotten that kind of thing. Cause that's the classic business thing, is like, if a guy is a hard ass, they're respected as, this solid guy who knows what he wants. Whereas if a girl is a hard ass, it's like, oh, what's wrong with her?
Why is she so mean?
Yeah, it's the classic infuriating, like, that shit drives me
so
nuts.
Infuriating. Yeah, it drives me crazy. And so
we're getting into podcast part 2 here. Yeah.
Podcast part 2. Yeah. It's so infuriating. But yeah, like I just had a couple of my friends come to mind, and they're so sweet, so kind. But like one of my friends just played the show, and she was telling me about something that happened. And I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And I was like, okay, this is what you're saying next time. I was like, if this happens again, I was like, you can copy paste this text, use it if you need it.
That's good.
I was like, use it if you need it.
That's good, man. I mean, it seems like you're practicing what you preach, and it seems like you got the right attitude for all of this. I mean, what's as we're kind of wrapping it up a little, like what are you focused on for this year? What are you focused on coming up? What are whether it's personal, whether it's musical, like what are some goals you're working on right now?
My biggest goals this year, I have a lot of them. As far as we'll start with music first. As far as music goes, this year I am undertaking something I've never done before. So I'm really excited about it. It won't be out by the time this comes out yet, so I can't say what it is yet. But I'm really, really excited about it, and it's something that I am putting my blood, sweat, and tears into right now. So it really means a lot to me, and in theory, it will be in like the later half of this year if everything goes according to plan.
Okay, but like something tied to what you're doing as Rossy.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be something I've never done before as Rossy, and I'm really, really, really excited about it, and it's taking everything I have in me right now in the best way. And so that I'm really excited about. With shows, I have some shows that also aren't announced yet that have also been some pretty lifetime achievements of mine. So I'm really excited to do those. And also just like as far as just, playing shows, putting out music, doing all those things on top of these things I have planned that I'm really excited about. Because this year right now is pretty already planned out for me, which is also just growth-wise an incredible thing. Because I remember January last year, I was in a completely different spot now. So even for me, just to see that growth change, I'm just like, holy moly, this is crazy. And then for personal growth, I definitely am wanting to work on exercising. That's like a really big one this year. Not even for like physical or anything like that. Just like you were speaking for mental attributes and just taking care of myself. It's a very physically demanding job, and just taking care of myself really well. And I really want to get better with like everything as far as health goes, like vitamins, probiotics, like just really taking care of me. I also want to start painting. Ooh. I really want to start painting.
Have you done that before? Thing. Did you do that when you were young?
Yeah, my mom's actually an incredible painter and drawer. So I've always done that, but I really want to do like, I don't know, like cool abstract paintings, I guess, just as like a fun outlet.
Having a different creative outlet.
Having a different creative outlet.
Yeah,
exactly.
I say this all the time, man. DJs need hobbies. Like there's got to be something else.
I also want to get a motorcycle.
Ooh, there you go.
those are my things, like health, painting, motorcycle.
I like it. That's like the yin and yang, painting and motorcycles.
Yeah, just no one told my mom about the motorcycle thing.
Okay, well, I can edit this out if your mom's going to listen to this.
Oh, no, it's okay. She knows it's coming. Yeah. She's literally like, Rossy.
Oh, that's great. Well, I mean, usually towards the end, I try to talk about like, what does this all mean? And like, why are we doing this? If you can distill it down to something, do you know like why you've ended up doing this and not doing something else? Why are you doing this? What does it all mean?
Number one, at the core of things, I think it's just a deep passion for music and creativity. Like that's where it all started. And then the idea of being able to share it with people, and especially being a female, I think it is really cool because it could hopefully inspire people who maybe feel like they can't do something or feel like they've been in a group of a situation where maybe they've been oppressed or whatever, to feel like they don't have as big as an opportunity to be like, no, I deserve this just as much. And I feel like that's such a cool thing. It takes a really brave person to chase after something that might not be that conventional, even if it is a conventional dream, whatever it could be, but to really like be like, this is a dream that I want to do. And so I feel like if I can hopefully take art that I have made and make it sit with people and impact their life and maybe make them feel like, even if the song just means something to them, that's obviously a huge win in my book. But if maybe it makes them feel like they can do whatever they want, or
did you have people that you look to in that? Did anyone fill that role for you when you were starting up?
This is going to sound really kind of funny, but when I was really little, I was obsessed with the movie Love and Basketball.
Okay.
And like something she always said in the movie was she wanted to be the first girl in the NBA. And that was just always kind of something that like really resonated with me, because I was like, that's so cool. Like, that's so sick. And so I think that just that attitude of being like, I deserve this as much as any other person, or if I work towards it, I can do it. And so anyone who's like a very strong female presence has always been someone, because I'm like, you're stirring, I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, you're stirring the thing up.
You can, yeah.
Okay, I was like, there's a couple times it almost came out, but I didn't know. I was like, you're stirring shit up, you're making noise, and for a good reason. Yeah. And so I just think that's so cool. And there's also this like quote somewhere I read about like just being daring enough to put something beautiful out into the world. And I just think that's so cool. So it's just like, you know, putting yourself out there in the way that you feel like you want to, or whatever that is, and just doing the dang thing, you know?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's great. It's, you know, actually participating in life rather than kind of letting it happen.
Yeah. And I just think that's so important. And like, obviously, whatever perspective you have on life and you choose, that's amazing. But I just think there's so much life to live. And with myself, always being a really creative person, I just was like, I am not meant to have a 9-to-5 and do this. Like, I want to use this. And I get some of the most beautiful, incredible DMs from people. And it just is like the most amazing feeling in the world to be able to maybe make that person feel like that.
Yeah, you know? No, that's beautiful. And you're right. I mean, again, we keep saying this, you know, to each their own. Like, somebody's best life is not somebody else's best life. It doesn't have to be, you know, living your best life doesn't have to be putting music out or whatever it is, but it's good that you were able to kind of figure that out early, I think.
Well, it's just, doing what you love. And I love it more than anything.
Is there anything we haven't talked about? Anything else that's on your mind? Anything else you want to let people know before we wrap it up?
I don't know. I don't think so. I feel like I'm like trying to think. I'm like, what have we not talked about? But I feel like we crushed a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think we did pretty good.
Yeah, I think we did pretty good.
You feel all right? Yeah.
Feeling pretty good.
Good. Well, let me ask you then, I'll ask you the last question here, which is, I ask this at the end of each one of the episodes. Just looking for a moment from your life, a memory from your life, could be from any age, any time, when in a single moment, music really deeply affected you, really had like a deep impact on you in whatever that moment is. It's meant to be a really broad question. There's no wrong answer. Doesn't have to be significant, kind of just the first thing you think of.
Oh, there's so many that just came to mind, but I feel like one that is this is like a story I told at my friend's wedding. So I feel like this is just something that's a really cool story, because music has deeply affected me on many, many ways. But I remember when I was saying earlier how I was going to festivals and stuff when no one was really doing it yet, I had a girl who was in my class in college comment on one of my Instagram photos of me going to a festival and was like, I really want to come to a festival with you. And I was like, well, you're welcome to come anytime you want. And literally like 2 days before, Hard Day of the Day tickets had just gone on sale. And so I bought a ticket by myself. Like, I had no one that I was going with at that moment.
Yeah.
And so then I told her that, because she like DM'd me, and I was like, I'm actually going to this. Like, if you want to come, I'm literally going by myself. Like, you're welcome to come if you want. And so she got a ticket, and then these two girls that she was friends with got a ticket. And then one of my other friends ended up getting a ticket. And literally we all met that morning. I had never met any people before besides like the girl that was in my class that asked me to come. We got in my little car and we drove to Southern California. We all slept in a single queen bed in this hotel all together, just like piled on top of each other to go to Hard Day of the Dead. And it was just the most beautiful weekend. And those girls are like still my sisters to this day. And every single moment, every single song we heard, every single set we were at, we were just like the most blissful people you could ever be. And that is just like such a pure, beautiful memory I have. And I feel like that definitely, like, it's like with the community thing we were talking about and everything, it just is like, music is so incredible what it can do and how it can bring people together. And I will never forget that, because I walked in literally just meeting these girls before we drove 8 hours to Southern California. And now I was in their weddings, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like the coolest thing. Like, music is truly the most beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it's one of those things too that, you know, you said you bought the ticket just to go by yourself, and then you ended up with all these other people. You became friends, and it's it was the music that sort of allowed everybody to open up and to accept new people and to have these experiences that then become such a part of the tapestry of your life. And yeah, that you're right. Music's the engine for all of that.
Yeah. Like who knows if I would even be friends with them if we would have never gone to that festival.
Yeah. You might have never even met him.
I've never met him. Yeah. Like I might have never even met him before.
Yeah.
And now some of my best friends in the world.
That's beautiful. I love that. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I think we're done. I think we did good here. Well, have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.